Good night, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite live sports show. Indeed, hashtag this just in. I am the Justin of hashtag this just in and joined by another great cast. Y'all know them by now if you watch enough of this show. We've got the coach, Brian Bolster of Bolster Sports and also of Sports Force. Along with him, Payton Doyle of the Payton Doyle Show. Guys, what is up? How are y'all feeling?
Doing great. Glad to be back on the show.
Feeling fantastic. I'm ready to get into this draft talk, man. It was exciting.
Draft. Oh, yeah, I can't trick anyone. Yes, indeed, this is a draft recap show. There's no NBA playoffs tonight. Well, not on this show, but on ESPN and ABC probably. But yes, indeed, Payton did spoil it for those who may not have read the title. We are recapping the 2022 NFL draft, and what a shocker, the most unpredictable draft for me in recent memory. I don't think anyone, including Trent Baalke, knew up until the number one pick was taken who would be the number one pick. I think the first 5 picks were all on defense. Only one quarterback was taken in the first round, and the next wasn't taken until the third. Again, running backs. Who knows about those? Who needs those? So, Coach Brian, we're gonna start with you. For you, what was the biggest takeaway of the 2022 NFL draft?
The biggest takeaway was that the passing game continues to be more and more valuable. Now, that may seem weird because the quarterbacks weren't that involved, but the receivers, correct me if I'm wrong, but 7 receivers picked in the top 18 picks.
6.
Just 6 in the top 18. Yeah, that's crazy. And not only were they picked in the top 18, people were trading up like crazy to get there. Like, that is shocking. And then, of course, if you look even to the front half of or more than the front half, the top 5 or so of the draft, you have pass rusher, corner, pass rusher to start it off. So it's like the guys who can stop them, and then the receivers. That was the biggest takeaway from me.
Same thing, Payton. What was your huge takeaway from this draft?
My big takeaway was pretty much the same thing as Brian, but opposite. There were more cornerbacks taken this year in this year's draft than any other position in the entire draft this year. So while the guys who are throwing the ball, this is a passing league, their value is skyrocketing. The receivers are following suit. They're getting big contracts this offseason. They're getting drafted highly. And now cornerbacks are also on the rise as well. If you look at Denzel Ward's new deal, most money ever by a cornerback. In a few years, that's not going to look like that much because cornerbacks, that market is skyrocketing. In fact, this was the first year in the common draft era where 2 cornerbacks went within the first 4 picks. And that just shows while the guys who are throwing the ball, their value is skyrocketing, the guys catching the balls from the quarterbacks are skyrocketing. And now the guys who are trying to stop that, their value is skyrocketing as well.
So I'm going to piggyback a bit off of what you said. Although, like having 15 defenders or 15 players from Georgia, that was amazing. And then we saw, how bad this quarterback class was rated because one in the first round, and then we had to wait for round 3 for 2 or 3 quarterbacks. But my big takeaway, touching on the receivers' point, is how teams are starting to value these receivers. So when you look at certain contenders, it is like they have said, yes, receivers are valuable, but not to the point that we're going to take out a huge chunk of our salary cap to pay them. And you look at Green Bay, you look at none other than Brian's old team, Tennessee. You look over there in Kansas City, Baltimore, they're telling themselves, yeah, receivers are valuable, but to what point? We can basically draft your successors. And then you see on the other side, teams who are not contenders, trying to be contenders, are willing to, I'm going to say, overpay these receivers because I'm not sure that any receiver in the league is worth $30 million per year. That's quarterback money we're talking about, guys. Like, at what stage is this going to stop? We're paying $30 million a year for guys like Devontae Adams or who got close. Tyreek Hill definitely is getting $30 million a year. So the draft was, like, for me, seeing teams like Green Bay, seeing teams like Kansas City, Tennessee saying, we are not willing to pay this much cap when we can find your replacement easily in the draft. So that being said, guys, still, a receiver wasn't taken number 1 overall. A defender was. So, Payton, did Jacksonville get it right at the top of the draft by taking Travon Walker?
No, they didn't. I understand the physical ability and the upside of Travon Walker is immensely high. I understand that. But Aiden Hutchinson was, without a doubt, the most ready player. For you draft him, you know he's going to give you 10 sacks a year as long as he's healthy. That is a guy in a draft where there isn't a clear number one. That is the guy you go with, that number 1. You're a struggling franchise. You need production. You don't need development. One thing Jacksonville has never been able to do in their franchise's history has develop a player at any position whatsoever. You need to draft someone who is already good and already ready to come in and produce in the NFL. And they didn't do that. And I understand their thinking behind it, but at the end of the day, I feel like Jacksonville overthought this decision. Maybe they had too much time at number 1 overall because you're basically on the clock the moment the season's over to overthink it. I felt like Aiden Hutchinson should have been their guy. But listen, Aiden Hutchinson's not complaining. He gets to stay in Michigan and Detroit. At the end of the day, Travon Walker might turn out to be a great player, but I feel like they should have gone with the safe option in Aiden Hutchinson, and I feel like he is going to make a greater impact in the NFL from day 1 than Travon Walker will.
Brian, you told me on Twitter that your first 5-6 picks went correctly, so clearly you thought that they got the best, or they went with the player they should have gone with.
Not exactly. That's just how I thought it would kind of play out. If I was them, I can get on board with Aiden Hutchinson just for the reasons that you said, but I kind of would have liked to see them go with Ike Ekwonu. Like, they need to go all in on Trevor Lawrence. That's the thing to me. And I know the other obvious thing to say is, hey, they should have traded down, which I would 100% have done if I was them. I don't think that there was any takers, so I don't think that was a realistic option. But to me, everything has to be about the quarterback. He had no chance to succeed last year. This year, I don't know. I just worry about them. They don't seem to have made major upgrades. They brought in Christian Kirk for a ton of money. They bring in Travon Walker, who I get the athleticism is just absolutely insane. But it's always a concern when it doesn't flash on tape, or at least you don't see the production out of that athleticism. I know part of it is how he was used. He wasn't used as an edge rusher the way that Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson are. So I don't know if that means the Jags are looking to slide him further outside and use him in that role more, or if they are content with having him be a little bit more of an interior guy, hand in the dirt, whether that is maybe a strong side 5 technique or like a 3 technique where we saw him in Georgia some. It's a swing for the fences. I'll give him that. It just worries me personally not seeing the production there for my number 1 overall pick.
So, guys, here's this, right? And this is no knock on Travon Walker. Very good dude. Very good player on clearly the best defense in all of college football that led to national championship, and he had his fingerprints all over the season. I am surprised, though, that Payton didn't mention his name because we talked about it on his show last week. Guys, the best player in this draft is Kayvon Thibodeau. He really is. And again, we've seen it over and over. These scouts get to this part of the draft and start to overthink things. You talked about it, Brian. The production is there. The skill set is there. The athleticism is there. And I'm going to try to coach my words carefully here. No, all of a sudden, right, these scouts, like, if you don't fit a mold, then they're trying to find things to knock your position or knock who you are. Huh? And it is known that Thibodeau has interest or thoughts well beyond the field. And I don't understand when did we get to the position where we are knocking a 21-year-old or thinking about life beyond football or just thinking about his life outside of the sport he plays. I just don't understand it. And it really hit home, right? Beyond just Kayvon Thibodeau. When the Bear scout, let me get his name correct here, Chris Prescott, came out in the media, and I mean, these are public words. These are not me looking. These are words that got him fired. And I will quote, he had comments about Jaquan Brisker, and he said he's the type of player they love PhD. And for those who don't understand what PhD means, poor, hungry, and desperate. And I liken that, or I say that to say, because Kayvon Thibodeau does not have that same situation, you're holding that against him. He was the best player in the draft. Brian, to your comments, the production is there on tape. I don't know how you look at this player who some are likening to the next Von Miller, and you decide this is not the number one, or this is not a player worthy of going number one, and falls all the way to number 5. Guys, I don't know how you think about Kayvon Thibodeau.
I think he's a great player. I am kind of surprised that he fell past number 4. I thought either the Texans or the Jets would end up getting him. And I am with you. It's one of those weird things where he's being talked about as the number 1 pick, really, ever since his freshman year at Oregon. I think he was the number 1 player in high school coming out. And it's just one of those cases where it does seem like too much time at that spot, where eventually they're going to find a reason for you to slide. He, of course, it kind of had some of the Stingley things as well with, hey, you're getting hurt some. How much then are you hurt, or are you holding yourself out? I don't think that really affected their draft stock at all, just because Stingley went number 3 as well. And the interesting thing with Thibodeau, I mean, I don't know him at all. But this kind of narrative has followed him since he was in high school. Again, I can't speak to the accuracy at all, but he's a Southern California kid that was, slated to go to USC. And supposedly, it was reported that USC didn't want him, even though he was that highly rated because, he's a knucklehead or a headache or whatever it may be. It just seems weird. I don't know if we'd find out more in years and maybe something will come to light, or it ends up being nothing. Usually these kinds of things end up kind of being nothing. The other one interesting part that I thought was interesting with specifically the Giants picking him is that they supposedly want to trade Kadarius Toney because he's pursuing a rapping career too much. And I don't know. It feels like maybe at least some part of that equation has to be missing. I'm not sure.
I mean, listen, we all know how I thought about Kayvon Thibodeau. I've said I think that he's the best player in this draft. I think he's going to come in and win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think that he should have been the number 1 overall pick. I knew he wasn't going to be. But this happens every year. There's always a guy that someone needs a nitpick. It was Justin Fields last year. It was Kayvon Thibodeau this year. A guy that someone needs to nitpick, who's a great player. The production's there, the athleticism's there, and the potential is there, which is something that I would want out of any top 5 pick, even top 3 pick, even number 1 overall pick. And for whatever reason, they want to nitpick him and say, oh, he's not focused on football and blah, blah, blah. They tried to do the same thing to Myles Garrett. They're doing the same thing to Kyler Murray still throughout his career. It seems like sometimes they just pick players that aren't. I mean, it's normal to have interests outside of football. You know what I mean? You could still love football and love other things as well. So it doesn't surprise me that he didn't go 1. I obviously think he's the best player in this draft, but I just people overthink it when it comes down to it. There's always that one guy every year that everyone's like trying to nitpick. They did it to Micah Parsons last year too. They did the same thing to Micah Parsons last year as well. And he fell all the way to Dallas at, I think it was like around pick 11, right? Why? I thought Carolina should have taken him. I thought Carolina should have taken him. I thought Detroit should have taken him. They all passed on him. And he became one of the best defensive rookies ever. So there's just always that one guy every year. And it sucks, but it happened to Kayvon this year.
maybe I'm coming into this with bias, because I will admit, right before the show, I decided to find out what the real reason was. And I read a piece on Sports Illustrated. If you're watching this show, please go and take a time to read the piece on Sports Illustrated. I think it was posted either last week or whatever not. And it is from his perspective on the interest he has beyond football. It's a very interesting piece. And what also struck me is that these same scouts who have this opinion of him, and I'm not going to knock them for it, apparently none of them took the time to call his own coach, Mario Cristobal. And this is not alleged. This is coming from Cristobal himself, saying no one has called me. And I find that very disturbing that you would come to a assessment of a player, a personal one at that, and not at least call his coach. I don't know.
There's some weird things, Justin. The last thing that I'll say, because I was listening to a podcast, this isn't even, like a primary source, but they brought up Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons as well. And I think just a lot of it goes into, these scouts, whoever is doing this evaluation are people too. And a lot of it comes down to relationships. And like some of the stuff that was brought up with Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons were like, he's a weird dude, or like they just didn't click. Like when they came to ESPN to like do interviews, they just rubbed people the wrong way. You know what I mean? Like these things that you can't put your finger on. There's no even necessarily like real data there, but it just seems like you rub people the wrong way, whether that's a you problem or a them problem, if that makes sense. Like, because of course that happens. It's just interesting. Like you're saying, it doesn't make much sense to me. I am surprised that Thibodeau fell. And hey, I wish him nothing but the best. And his, what is he interested in? NFTs. I know that was one thing that was mentioned. Hopefully his NFTs are good and his pass rushing.
Yeah, because football players aren't supposed to play chess or are supposed to think about NFTs or their future beyond football. They're not supposed to have conversations with Phil Knight or LeBron James. Like, I don't know what we want of these players. Well, but what I want of you guys. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Payton.
I was going to add one more thing. Even if you notice some of these guys that we have the narrative that all they do is football, like Tom Brady, we have this narrative that all Tom Brady thinks about from the day he wakes up to the day he goes to sleep for the last 22 to 23 years has been football. When clearly that's entirely not true. He started his own brand. He set himself up so that he has a life outside of football, because guess what NFL stands for? Not for long. I think it's great that guys have interests outside of football. I think just as long as it doesn't get in the way of football, which 99% of the time it doesn't, I don't see an issue with it. But a lot of scouts, for whatever reason, do.
Just to play devil's advocate for 1 second, because you brought up my boy Tom Brady. I would say that people who would, go against your point would say he started doing that like after 4 Super Bowls or after whatever, which again, that's not necessarily a completely fair point, because just to bring it over to the NBA, I'm a big Lakers fan. Like Shaq and Kobe were coming out with albums as they were in the midst of their prime, right? So it's really more about the person than necessarily a specific interest that might be outside of your sport.
And the thing is, we're not talking about James Harden going to clubs all till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then being tired the next day. We're talking about a guy who plays chess, talks about NFTs, aligns himself with LeBron James to look forward towards the future, because we don't want responsible 21-year-olds, right? Yeah. What I do want y'all guys to do for me, though, guys, name me your biggest winners. Brian, I'm going to start with you. I know there's some teams floated out there, the 2 New York teams, Kansas City. But for you, and you don't have to limit it to just one team, who were the biggest winners of the 2022 NFL Draft?
All right, well, I'll start off by saying I will be a bit of a Scrooge to the New York Jets. I'm sorry, you can't win the draft. I will not give, some team that won the draft just because you're awful and you had so many high picks because you're awful. Because it's always like, typically speaking, these bad teams that win the draft, and then the Ravens, of course. So the Ravens are the obvious answer. They won the draft, but The Chiefs, I'm glad you mentioned the Chiefs. I loved especially Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. Loved those picks. I even liked the Seattle Seahawks draft a little bit, which I know was a kind of a weird one. The Eagles had a great draft, but they had the trade. The A.J. Brown piece was kind of the biggest part of that, in my opinion, but I like them bringing in Jordan Davis. If I had to pick one, I'll give a shout out to an underrated one. Can I do that? Because I feel like there's some obvious choices. I'm going to say your Green Bay Packers. I really liked their draft, and I know they received some heat, but I feel like it was expected. Like the Packers weren't going to draft a receiver in the first round. I really would have been surprised. Now, maybe if one of the top guys fell all the way down to them, I could see it. But especially once the top 6 guys went off the board in the top 18, I just don't think it was realistic, and I think it was smart. Now, I know there's some question marks about the guys that they did pick, like Quay Walker. Was he even the best linebacker on his team at Georgia? He obviously is the one with the physical build. He's the prototypical linebacker, unlike Nakobe Dean. So that pick makes sense to me. Devontae Wyatt, supposedly some character concerns that I don't know about, but I know that was brought up. I think that's great value for him at strictly a football player, at least at the very end of the first round there. Christian Watson, arguably the best athlete at the receiver position in this year's draft. We know that the Packers love big receivers. He fits that mold. They bring in Sean Ryan, a guy with an incredible athletic pedigree going all the way back to high school, which I kind of like to see in the NFL draft. Like we talked about with Thibodeau, like if you're that highly ranked as a high schooler, now as a college player, like there's something there. Romeo Doubs, a 4th-round receiver that they brought in, another speed guy that's like 6'2", 200 plus, just kind of fits that Green Bay mold. I know we had talked about, Aaron Rodgers with rookie receivers, but I think he may get over it. They're paying him, and he's that good where I think he's going to be able to elevate these guys. So I'll leave it short with that, but just through the first 4 rounds, I thought defense got better, the receiving room got better, and they addressed the offensive line.
You've now made my day so much better, and you've also made my work so much easier because now I don't have to talk about the Packers later down in the show. Thank you so much, Brian. See anything, Payton? Who were your biggest winners coming over this draft?
I mean, it would be easy. It would be too simple, like Brian said, to say like the Giants or the Jets just because of how many top picks they had. I do think that they did get better and they drafted really good players. And with the picks that they had, they made really good picks. But a team that he didn't mention, I was going to mention the Eagles, but a team that he didn't mention that I also thought deserved some credit was the Baltimore Ravens. I get that they traded away Marquise Brown, which is kind of weird because they don't really have any really great receivers worth mentioning on that team. But it's not their style of football. They don't need a star receiver. And you look at what they did. They drafted a lot of players that really fit the mold of what they're trying to do. I really like the Kyle Hamilton pick. I think that he's going to be extremely dynamic. And I understand the positional value is kind of weird because he's like a safety. But like I also could see him being a threat in the pass rushing game as well, which is something that Baltimore loves to do. Then they got the center out of Iowa, Tyler Linderbaum, which I think is a great pick late in the first round. And then what is a really interesting pick is they got David Ojabo out of Michigan, who had the torn Achilles during his draft workout, and his stock plummeted, of course, because of that. That's a huge injury, and there's a lot of question marks surrounding him. But if he becomes the player that we thought he could be before the injury, that is like a first-round pick in the second round. So I thought they had a great draft. And you look in their later rounds, they went offensive lineman, or they went a defensive tackle actually out of UConn. Then they also had they drafted the huge freaking offensive lineman out of Minnesota in the 4th round. He was like 6'8", 384 pounds. If he develops like Baltimore is a team that can draft developmental players because they actually know how to develop players. That goes into what I was saying, why Jacksonville should just draft players that are already ready to play. But Baltimore can develop players. And if they develop this guy into a good offensive tackle, oh my goodness, he's going to be a unit, right? So I actually thought they had an interesting draft. They went a lot for their scheme rather than the mold of what the NFL tries to tell them is good, which I thought was interesting. And I would give them like a B+. I thought they had a really good draft.
That's the thing, right? And it comes from learning from Ozzie Newsome, because for me, that former Baltimore GM, I thought he was the best evaluator and developer of talent. I shout out to him, I thought, and that's why I have always respected the franchise that is Baltimore. With you, Brian, but I have to give the Jets some love still. As much as I gave them an A+ grade for the last draft, I'm going to come back here. Jets, Jets. And unfortunately, your partner in crime, he was supposed to come on the show, but he couldn't due to some other, responsibilities. So I'm going to show the Jets some love and say, Sauce Gardner, who's arguably the best corner in the draft. Later in the draft, you got the best running back. You can argue wherever you put him, maybe that the receiver you got was the best receiver in the draft. Yes, it helps when you have all of these picks, but Mike McCagnon before this was awful. So I'm going to give the New York Jets some love and say, I thought they had a good draft. Because just because you have the picks does not mean that you are going to take good players. We've seen bad general managers and David Gettleman, I'm looking at you. But reality situation, I'm going to give them some love because we don't talk about the Jets often on the show. So if we're going to talk about the Jets, Brian, I'm going to come here to you right now. Talk about the winners, but in your mind, who were the big losers in this draft?
I think just on paper, you look at the draft picks, the choice is going to be the Washington Commanders, who I think were seen as a reach on their first, second, and third round picks, most specifically with Jahan Dotson going 16th overall. Shocked people. I know that shocked me. And that he was over Treylon Burks as well. That's a little bit surprising. I get that there's, every team's going to have their own rankings, but seeing Jahan Dotson at 16th overall definitely surprised me. That shocked me. And then I do have to say the Arizona Cardinals, I think, were the biggest loser. And for a couple of reasons. One, I really like Trey McBride, the tight end. They got the top tight end in this draft is good. But they continued to neglect the trenches in the way that I think they need to, at least. And they didn't have a first-round pick on paper. That's because they traded it to the Baltimore Ravens for Hollywood Brown. And one, I think that's a mistake because trading a first-round pick for Hollywood Brown, I don't think is great value. But also, if we read the tea leaves now, even before the suspension of DeAndre Hopkins, they're going to end up, we talked about, paying receivers, and it either means an early exit or you end up trading them beforehand. Well, they've paid DeAndre Hopkins $27.5 million per year. He's not going to be on the Cardinals anymore after this year. I'd be shocked, which means, and Hollywood Brown is due to get paid. So they're going to end up with using this first round pick on Hollywood Brown, a little bit questionable, and then paying him big money and losing DeAndre Hopkins. Like, that to me is just wild. With the alternative being, okay, they don't pay Hollywood Brown, and then you just spent a first-round pick on essentially like a one-year kind of rental, and then DeAndre Hopkins is out the door. The offensive line isn't where it needs to be. Who knows? I know it was an attempt to make Kyler Murray happy. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But to me, the Cardinals, they're still going to be a bit fraudulent this year.
I think they're actually going to end up paying Hollywood Brown, which is doubling down on the mistake of trading a first-round pick, simply because I think they knew beforehand of the DeAndre Hopkins suspension, hence why they brought in Hollywood Brown. But I don't know what tape they're watching, but I know of Hollywood Brown's limitations. I've seen them firsthand watching all these Baltimore games. Payton, do you agree it's Arizona, or do you have somebody like Dallas or possibly New England?
I have New England. New England, listen, I get it. Everyone's like, oh, well, don't question Bill Belichick. No, I'm going to question him because I don't think Bill Belichick has had a single good draft since he's taken over that kind of like control as the general manager in New England. I don't think that he's good at drafting players. They made so many strange decisions from top to bottom of the draft. It wasn't even just the fact that they drafted Cole Strange in the first round, despite him being projected as a mid-second round pick. It wasn't just the fact that they drafted Tyquan Thornton in the second round, despite him being projected as a day 3 pick. It wasn't just that. It was also the fact that they spent 2 picks on running backs, despite already having a crowded backfield. And they also just decided to draft a quarterback in the 4th round, despite already supposedly having their quarterback of the future in Mac Jones. It made no sense. They got absolutely zero value at the positions that they went in needing, such as edge rusher, such as wide receiver. They got no better at any of those positions. So guess what? You might as well have not even drafted anyone. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Like you needed edge rushers, you needed wide receivers, and you didn't get better. The draft is supposed to make you get better. How did you fail to get better at the positions that you needed to get better at? It makes no sense.
Hey, I'm with you. Weird picks. Bill Belichick does not have a great track record.
No.
I'm there with you. I do kind of think Cole Strange will work out, but where he's really been bad is the wide receiver position. So it's like RIP Tyquan Thornton. I'm rooting for you, but it's kind of like the kiss of death. But Justin, I heard you mention the Cowboys. I actually think they had a pretty good draft. I really do.
Go right ahead. Chime in.
Yeah, Tyler Smith, one of the best athletes as an offensive lineman in this draft for sure. I know he's raw, but the Cowboys have shown the ability to develop offensive linemen. At least in my opinion, they have it. And they take projects. Like we see this over and over with the Cowboys. That's why they always get blasted. They have the tendency to take big names, not necessarily positions of need like CeeDee Lamb, and then they take big swings on really athletic guys. And that's what you see with Tyler Smith, their 1st round offensive tackle. 2nd round, they go with the pass rusher Sam Williams out of Ole Miss, who had his ups and downs. But I mean, he is the prototype. He's athletic. Then Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama's receiver. Watched him play. He's legit. He's good, especially in the 3rd round, late 3rd round. And then even I like Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin, their tight end. I think they had a really good draft. I don't see why it's being criticized so much. I know the one pick, and I get it, but the one pick people really wanted to change was, okay, trade out that 1st round pick and make that Jermaine Johnson. Like, yeah, okay, I'd be fine with that too. But to act, I don't know, I think part of it is coming from a Cowboys hate perspective, at least in my opinion.
Oh, I just put that name out there because that's been thrown around. And the reason I let y'all go on is because I have now tried to dial back on my criticism. So I don't want to criticize people for their drafts, considering we don't know what these players are going to look like on an NFL field until they hit an NFL field. So I purposely left myself out of this segment and let y'all two guys go ahead because, yeah, I'm just dialing back a bit. And Neil is in the background laughing, but I'm dialing back a bit on my negative, nasty ways. So I let y'all go ahead with calling losers because we don't know what these drafts are going to look like years down the road. And I'm quite sure if we had a lot of these drafts to do over, we do them over so quickly. Like 2018 draft, I'm quite sure Baker Mayfield does not go number 1, right, Payton?
Well, listen, all I'm saying is if I was the GM of the Browns in 2018, he wouldn't have gone number 1 then either. But the Browns are going to Brown. That's just what they do. The Browns are going to be the Browns forever. Hopefully not now.
Well, hopefully not no. But then as we talked about changing draft positions or not knowing what the future holds, Payton, what was the biggest surprise for you, the biggest shocker, biggest stunner in this year's draft?
The biggest stunner for me was Detroit trading up 20 picks to draft Jameson Williams. Not that I thought it was a bad pick, right? And not that I thought it was a bad move. I actually think it was a good move by them to try to get some firepower on the offensive end of the ball. But I thought, oh my goodness, this is it. This is Kenny Pickett. This is the first domino in the quarterback draft that is they're all gonna start falling. There's gonna be a few in this first round. The Lions traded up 20 picks for a quarterback. and that was going to be the first big domino. Once Kenny Pickett went, I thought everyone else was going to follow suit and start trading up for quarterbacks. But then they went receiver, and then the quarterbacks didn't go. And even when Kenny Pickett did go at 20, it wasn't until not the second round, but the third round where we saw quarterbacks go. So I thought, one, Detroit trading up 20 picks was a surprise, but the fact that it wasn't for a quarterback was the bigger surprise to me.
Same thing, Brian.
Yeah, I have to agree with Payton that not only did the quarterbacks go late, but that the second quarterback wasn't taken until the 74th pick overall. Like none in the late first, where a lot of times, like you're saying, you'll see those late trade ups to get somebody wants to go get their guy. 0 in the second round, and then not even immediately in the third round. Like I don't think anybody was enthused. Nobody traded up for these guys. I think until the Panthers traded up to be able to get Matt Corral, but like the Titans get Malik Willis, they didn't trade up. I don't believe. I could be mistaken. And the Falcons, I don't think they traded up to get Desmond Ridder. It was just that was bizarre. And then, as I had already mentioned, the Jahan Dotson thing. But one thing, since you were calling us Debbie Downers, to be a little bit more positive. If Hollywood Brown was really going to succeed in a situation, it would be in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. That is the situation for him to succeed, and I hope it does happen. I just question the move big picture.
For me, like y'all, I thought for sure Malik Willis would have been a first rounder. I kind of always got the sense that the rest of the quarterbacks were going to have to wait to third round. And this is not because I knew anything. I just got that sense. Like when you hear scouts talk about how not highly rated these quarterbacks were, I kind of got the feeling that these quarterbacks were not going to rush off the board like in years past. But as you said, to see the second one not been taken until pick 74, like, wow. The kind of shock, and I mean, I've calmed down now, I mentioned it before, was like Green Bay not going after a veteran receiver. And maybe they did because Brian Gutekunst did say people are not in a rush to trade with the Packers. And the reason I bring this up is because Aaron Rodgers does not have a lot of patience. This is known. He's not a patient guy with young receivers. So I figured with 2 first-round picks, and I think 2 more in the second, there would be a package of some deal to either go after A.J. Brown. I figured we would not get Deebo Samuel because we're in the same conference as the 49ers. And then last season, or the season before that, with the 49ers openly going after Aaron Rodgers, I think the relationship between Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan is kind of broken down. So I figured we were not going to get Deebo. But I thought we might have been in play for A.J. Brown or possibly DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. That didn't come to fruition. I thought possibly we were going to go after, is his name, Chris Olave. I thought that would have, we would have moved up. But I should know better because Gutekunst is not an aggressive person in draft. And he's a guy that lets the draft come to him more than, I want to say, overpaying or overvaluing somebody in draft. So he's always going to stick to his draft board. So like Brian said, I think we got good value in the first round picks that we got. And they were kind of positions of need, although I don't really value inside linebackers and defensive tackles in today's NFL as much anymore. But we got younger and faster at those positions. And when I started to really calm down is when we got Christian Watson in the second round. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm good with this. Like, we got the guy that, fits the mold, fits the Jordy Nelson mold, it fits the Devontae Adams mold, a bigger receiver on the outside that Aaron Rodgers typically favors. And when you look at the draft overall, we hit a lot of needs and highly rated players in that. Yeah, I can't hate on the draft anymore. What I will say, I think the philosophy of the Packers is slowly changing in terms of on-field production. So what is primarily or customarily a high-scoring offense, I think going forward, I think this is going to be a defensive team first. And Brian, we talk about this a lot. What is hidden in this offense is that this is really a run-first team. like this offense is a run-first offense, and I think you're going to see more ball control a lot more this season. I think we're going to run the football a lot more, control the clock, and play a lot more defense. So I was surprised we didn't package our first rounders or first and a second to either move up in the draft or get a veteran receiver. But I've calmed down now, and I'm happy with the draft that we have. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting where we are. Oh, go ahead, guys, if y'all want to chime in, by the way.
No, I agree with you. I think they kind of have an MO. They want to run the ball and then just drop bombs. And they got some speed guys to do that before they had MVS. I think the question mark, and it's a 100% valid one, I think even if you are really high on Christian Watson, let's say, is Aaron Rodgers has always made his kind of living with having really good chemistry with his top receiver. Like the back shoulder fade. If I had to pick any quarterback to be like, he made that, it'd be Aaron Rodgers with Jordy Nelson, obviously with Devontae Adams. And that's the one piece on those third downs who's able to step up. I think that's a valid question. But I think the Packers, they're a good franchise. They're doing good things. I think ultimately what stopped them from getting a veteran receiver is trading away the assets, having to pay them big money, and not knowing maybe how they fit in with Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's a valid concern, not necessarily that you don't pull the trigger on it, but I think those are valid concerns with receivers who are different types than what Aaron Rodgers has also worked with in a DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel.
I have to agree with that. Sorry, folks, I kind of lost my train of thought, and it should have been an easy, segue into the next segment, because the next segment is dealing with receivers. So, Payton, were you shocked at the draft day deals for first A.J. Brown and then shortly afterwards Hollywood Brown?
Not necessarily. Obviously, like the instant, like, oh my gosh, this happened. Like that was like a shock. You know what I mean? But you can see that just as I know we were talking about this before the show even, but it seems like some of the league is half in and half out on paying receivers. Some people are questioning, are these receivers worth it? And some teams are saying yes, and some teams are saying no. It's clear and obvious that the Cardinals think they are, and the Eagles think they are. The Ravens don't think they are. They think we're a running football team, and as long as we have guys that are serviceable, why do we need a star receiver? You know what I mean? Why would we want to pay someone that much money? Same thing with the Titans. We're a run-first team. Why do we need to pay a receiver that much money? And the Eagles, they're a run-first team, but I think they want to throw the ball more this year. So maybe they saw, okay, there is value in a star receiver for us. And the Cardinals, with their air raid offense, obviously they need receivers as much as possible. And now that DeAndre Hopkins was suspended for 6 games, I know no one really foresaw that happening, but they needed to make a trade for a wide receiver, and they felt more comfortable trading for guys that were already established rather than trying to draft and develop someone in the mid to late first round.
Brian, this is one of your own. It's like must hurt. Were you initially stunned by the deals for A.J. Brown and then Hollywood Brown?
I wasn't shocked, but I definitely was kind of hurt. A.J. Brown, one, is a great player. He's a Titan, so he's on my team. But he's one of my favorite players. Like, I really liked A.J. Brown. He was a lot of fun. I think he'll really work out well with the Eagles. I think they intentionally went and got a great yards after the catch type of receiver to help that offense and to pair with Devontae Smith. I think that's great. For Hollywood Brown, I was shocked. I was shocked because I didn't know about any suspension at that time. I didn't know he was available. They had really kept that pretty hush-hush. And everybody knows that him and Lamar Jackson are great friends. So I was surprised to initially hear that one for sure. And what's interesting is I think you're seeing it on both ends of the spectrum. Like a lot of the run-first teams like Payton was talking about, yeah, like we aren't going to pay a big-time receiver. But then also the teams with like a great quarterback, some are doing it and some aren't. Like, I think part of the thing with the Chiefs was like, well, we have Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's going to make receivers. I think we've seen the same thing with the Aaron Rodgers, a Tom Brady, where you don't feel as beholden to overpay on certain weapons because those guys will make the weapons in a lot of ways.
I was not shocked at AJ Brown. As you said, I didn't know about Hollywood Brown's request, nor did I know about the impending suspension. But I always got the feeling that the Titans were just not going to pay for a receiver that type of money that AJ Brown would demand. And you're just seeing it, as I spoke about earlier in the show, you're just seeing contenders saying we are not willing to take up that much cap space on wide receivers. Like the Green Bay Packers said, like, we're not paying Devontae Adams $30 million a year. Same thing with the Kansas City Chiefs and Tyreek Hill. All of these teams, or these contending teams, are not willing to tie up the cap on a position where it's so dependent on someone else and our scheme. So they said no. So the AJ Brown one didn't shock me. Also in this, what's shocking is that the San Francisco 49ers have not moved on from Deebo as yet, because Deebo really does sound like he is stuck in. And if you're going to trade Deebo Samuel, I think the time was now, because you had such a wide receiver deep class that you go after somebody in the first round. But, you know, for them to be so set on not trading Deebo and Deebo dug in, I don't know what's going to go on there. I would hate to think that San Francisco inevitably does have to trade him, because you missed your chance at replacing him in this particular draft. Brian, we talked about it earlier, these quarterbacks, our teams waiting late to get these quarterbacks off the board, about 6 or so highly rated ones, and we're talking about Kenny Pickett to the Steelers, Desmond Ridder to Atlanta, Malik Willis to your own Tennessee Titans. We can go on and on and on. Which one do you expect to start immediately, and then which one do you have to, or are you thinking is going to have the most success in this league?
All right, well, the one that I think is going to start immediately is Kenny Pickett. I think he's going to start immediately. I'd be surprised if he didn't start immediately. I think the number 2 option would be Matt Corral. There's the chance that he beats out Sam Darnold. I think more likely. Hey, this isn't because I won't get to make the decision, all right? I won't be the one making the decision. Sam Darnold, hey, they drafted Ike Ekwonu. If he gets his chance, watch out. But, hey, we don't need to go on this tangent. But I think the likely scenario in Carolina is they start Sam Darnold, but it's with a really short leash. If there's any kind of signs of struggle, whether it's even purely him or the team just isn't quite winning, if Matt Rule's job is on the line, then they're just going to make a change, almost just to make a change, if it came down to that. But I think he's the second likeliest option. One other option, I just want to throw out the name. I think he ended up not even getting drafted. There's some injury concerns. Don't be shocked to see Carson Strong have more success than some of these other quarterbacks that were drafted. He's got a lot of arm talent. And I listen to Jordan Palmer a lot, and he's talked about, like, Carson Strong. He's probably got the best arm in this entire draft class. He just can't do as much with his feet and off platform maybe that a Malik Willis could. But really his arm is definitely, like, on that level. So just don't be shocked. I know that he's behind Jalen Hurts, and I like Jalen Hurts. But in terms of having the most success in the league, that is tough. That is tough. I would go with, if you made me pick somebody, and it's a lot of situational kind of things, I would go with, it's either Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder. I can't go with Kenny Pickett because I just can't go with the guy who wears 2 gloves. Like that, I just can't see it until it happens. I can't believe it until I see it. So I'm going to go with Desmond Ridder, who I think is in a really pretty good situation with the Falcons, where he may not have to start right away. I don't think he'll start right away. And I think he's a really good fit for the Arthur Smith offense. I think Desmond Ridder is very similar to a Ryan Tannehill type of quarterback. Hopefully he'll have some more upside. But Arthur Smith had a lot of success with Ryan Tannehill, so I see similar things for Desmond Ridder.
Payton, who starts immediately and who has the most success in this league?
My prediction is that there won't be a rookie quarterback that starts week 1. of this NFL season. I think that if you look at the teams, the Steelers did pay Mitch a good amount of money. They paid Mitch Trubisky a fair amount of money to come in and play quarterback. I think he's going to start week 1 for them. I think Kenny Pickett will get his chance later on in the year once he grows and develops, and it depends on where Pittsburgh is and playoff contention and whatnot. Then you look at other quarterbacks that got drafted. A lot of teams that drafted quarterbacks this year actually have a quarterback in place already. Brian mentioned it. I think that if I was to pick someone who was going to start, it would be Matt Corral. I don't view Sam Darnold as a viable placeholder quarterback for him, mainly because, one, he's not really experienced that much. There's not much for a young quarterback to learn from him behind him. Obviously, I get it. He started in the league and whatever. So, of course, there's stuff to learn from him, but he's never played in a playoff game. He's never really won anything or done anything substantial in the NFL. And to be honest, do I want my quarterback to play like Sam Darnold did? I don't think so. But that being said, I would say if there was a quarterback that would start week 1, it'd be Matt Corral. And who I think will have the best success in the NFL, I'm going to go with Willis. I think that he has by far the most upside. And I'm a big upside guy when it comes to quarterbacks. I said Josh Allen was going to be a stud, turned out to be a stud. Everyone was like, well, he hasn't put it all together. He's not accurate. I'm like, trust me, give him some time. He will. He has that upside. I see it in him. And I would say Malik Willis has that same kind of upside that Josh Allen did coming out. It's just the fact that quarterbacks were so cold coming in this year in terms of hype that he fell all the way to the 3rd round. And not only that, he got drafted in a pretty good situation where the team, 1, doesn't need him to come in and be the hero right away. And 2, they were the 1 seed in the AFC last year. They are a pretty good team. They've been solid and in the mix in the AFC for a few years now with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, who's okay, but Malik Willis has more upside than Tannehill, and I see him developing into a great quarterback and one that will have great success in this league.
I know, and I'm going to let you pass on this one, Payton, and let it slide. But you didn't just compare a guy 5 inches shorter and 60 pounds lighter than Josh Allen to Josh Allen. I know you didn't make that comparison there just now. I know.
Well, but you think about it, right? Big arm and athletic. What is Josh Allen coming into the league? Big arm and athletic. Sometimes has accuracy issues. Sometimes, isn't very refined in his mechanics. It's the same kind of knocks on Malik Willis as it was on Josh Allen. Now, obviously, I get it. Josh Allen is amazing, and the physical stature of him is much larger than that of Malik Willis. But Malik Willis isn't a small quarterback. Let's not get this. I mean, look at the way he's built, and you tell me if he looks small on an NFL field. I don't think he's going to have that issue.
I don't think so either. Just poking holes at you. For me, though, I forgot all about Mitchell Trubisky, to be honest, because I thought Kenny Pickett would start right away. I'm like, oh, yes, you reminded me that there is that dude. I do think, though, that he gets on the field at some point because I've seen Mitchell Trubisky his entire career, and he isn't it. Kenny Pickett gets on the field. I am not a fan of his measurables, but I also believe in situations. And being in Pittsburgh is going to help with a coach with a great defense and also with great weapons. Just because he's in Pittsburgh, I will say Kenny Pickett will have the better career of all of them. Because, as we know, situations make quarterbacks and typically not the other way around, unless you are, next level or generational talent. You usually do not survive the situation you're in if it's a bad one. Just look at New York. Look at Chicago. During my entire time of watching the NFL, and it has been quite a while, Chicago Bears have never, ever developed a quarterback of note. And it's not by accident. It is your situation, huh? So Kenny Pickett being in Pittsburgh, and will give him the nudge just over everyone else. Guys, it has been a quick, short, and great episode. So I'm going to let y'all plug yourselves in and let's go and watch some NBA playoffs. Brian, thank you so much for hopping on. Tell the lovely folks watching where to find you and what do you have next.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. It was a great episode. Appreciate talking it up with you and Payton. But you can find me at Bolstered Up Sports on TikTok, on Twitter. And then you got to make sure to check out the Warzone Sports Network YouTube channel where you'll see Sports Force, which is the show Tuesdays with me and Joe Skirto. Thank you again, Justin.
Always, Brian. You know you have an open spot here, as does Payton Doyle, who is finally back, letting people know what you got coming up and how to find you.
So, as many may know, I took a long year break, but I am back. The Payton Doyle Show.
Have a capable quarterback.
Yeah, well, I was kind of ducking the whole Baker Mayfield situation last year. That's definitely it. I didn't want Brian to, come on my show and make fun of me because I totally missed on that one. But yes, I'm back and the Browns are back too. So, you could find my show on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitter Live every single Wednesday at 10 a.m. The Payton Doyle Show is the name. You could find it also the audio version on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. As far as my social medias, it is at PD Sports on TikTok and Instagram, and at Payton Doyle Show on Twitter and Facebook. But before you go look at me, go show these two guys some love. They're doing great work, and it's always a pleasure and a blessing to be able to work alongside them.
Guys, they're also great followers on Twitter. I follow them on Twitter, so please look out for both Brian and Payton on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter as well, #ThisJustIn. Please, please, please put in the hashtag. None of us want to listen to Matt Kellerman. None of us really do. So that's #ThisJustIn. We are live every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. You can also find us on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So for Brian Bolster, for Payton Doyle, I am Justin of the #ThisJustIn signing out. Thank you so much for watching, and tune in next Monday.
I don't have a mark on my face, and my upset son in Mystic, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the kingdom out of here, just the same. I still got the world. I still got the world. I still got the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?